Welcome to the Thriving Christian Artist, the podcast where we hope you connect with God to bust through the roadblocks that have held you back for years, create the work you love, and really live the life you know God created you to live as an artist in His kingdom. I'm Matt Thomas, your host. Let's get started. Well, hey there, my friend. I'm really glad that you're with me on the podcast today. I'm always excited when I get to meet somebody who really carries the same heart that I do for healing the hearts of artists and encouraging creative people to be who God's called them to be. And I can't say enough good things about the interview that I'm bringing you today here on the podcast with my new friend, Dr. Dianne Collard, who is the founder director of a great organization over in Charlotte, North Carolina called Collards Story. She's a great influencer of creative people. She's a writer herself, a missionary for 30 years in Europe, and somebody that God called really significantly to begin to encourage the hearts of artists all over the world. We had a great conversation talking about what that means and what it means to what she calls nurture the soul of a city, which is all what they're trying to do over there in Art Charlotte. And it's going to be a big encouragement to you if you have a heart to do that, if you need to be encouraged as a creative today, and if you've got a heart to see something like this started in your area, you know, a local group of creatives in your neck of the woods, wherever you are all over the world. We talk specifically about how to begin to do that on today's podcast. So I know that's going to be a big blessing to you. Well, hey, before I do that, you know, I love to give a shout out to all my podcast listeners. And today, the shout out I want to give is to Anthony. He said, inspirational, God-centered information for artists. I've been listening for a couple of weeks. I've listened to 20 or so podcasts and have found them all helpful. I'm in the midst of juggling a 21-year construction business and striving to make my art business, which I love, to be profitable enough to become my main income. All of your information is so helpful. I just listened to the pandemic podcast. Thank you for taking the time to encourage and inspire all of us. Again, the information on today's podcast was great and on point. Thanks, Anthony. Well, Anthony, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that the real practical information that I'm trying to share every week here on the Thriving Christian Artist podcast is hitting home and making a difference in your life. And thanks for taking the time to let me know that on the podcast review. And listen, if you're listening out there, you've never reviewed the podcast, listen, I would love for you to. I guess I'm going to have to start giving out $100 bills. Not really. But listen, it always blesses our heart, really, to get, reviews and that sort of thing. We get a little notification that says, you have a review. I love that. So anyway, please do that. Share the podcast on Instagram, on Facebook, anywhere that you're on social media, and let others know if it's been a blessing to you. All right. Well, hey, I'm going to get out of the way. You're going to love this podcast with my new friend, Dr. Dianne Collard. Here it is. Well, hey there, my friend. I'm so glad that you're with me today on the podcast. I'm really honored to have my new friend, Dr. Dianne Collard, with me, who is not only an incredible artist, author, mentor to artists, but leads an incredible organization with a team called Art Charlotte over in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Dr. Collard, thank you so much for being on today. It's my pleasure to have you on the podcast.
It's my pleasure to be here, Matt.
How wonderful. We were just talking. It's like, we have to be friends because we're just right down the road. It's like we have to, we know so many of the same people, right?
Right.
So for folks that are just getting to know you, may not be familiar with your ministry, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and where you're located. So.
Well, I'm currently living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm a founder director of the organization called Art Charlotte. But I've been a missionary for 34 years, and most of those in Europe. And so I still am the Europe director for a mission agency called Artists in Christian Testimony International. We have about 500 artists around the world in North America as well as around the world that are serving the Lord through their art.
How wonderful. We just had Dr. Spradlin on. And
really?
I've so enjoyed getting to know Byron. And again, it was kind of these parallel universes, you know, as we're going along. And somebody mutually says, you guys don't know each other. You have to know each other. What are you talking about? So it's.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad.
Yeah, just a wonderful connection. I think we spent about 35 minutes on the interview and about an hour and a half just talking afterwards.
I can believe it. Knowing Byron, I'm sure that happened.
That's right. That's right. Well, so let's roll back the tape, because, everybody sees where you are now, the incredible things that God's using you in over these last 30 years. How did you get into feeling a call as an artist and as a missionary to do this thing uniquely that God had called you to do?
Well, I'm a unique person on your program in that I would not call myself an artist, even though I'm a published author,
Right.
but I had no background in the arts, and
Mm.
we were missionaries in working behind the Iron Curtain and then working in former Eastern Europe. At first, we were living in Vienna, and during that time, we were living in Vienna in early 90s. We got a call that our college-age son in California had been brutally murdered during the night. And that, I could talk for hours on the journeys that God took me after that. That was in the end of September. And in December, when I was in the very deepest part of my grief and total despair,
Right.
I'll try to shorten it, but ultimately, I was trying to find God, where is God? Do I want to go on living? Can I go on living? Where was God when Tim was murdered? All those questions that are normal questions. And I couldn't handle being inside the flat. So I started walking in the lanes of the first district of Vienna, and it started snowing and I had to go somewhere. And so I thought, for very little money, I can bury myself literally in the Kunsthistorische Art Museum of Vienna, the art history museum. That began days of me haunting the halls of the. I don't know why I know why I went there the first time. Why God kept taking me back. At first, it was paintings of war and destruction and horrible scenes that mirrored what I was feeling inside. And then over time, it was paintings of the Passion of Christ. And especially those paintings that had Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Yeah.
I so identified with Mary, having watched her son be brutally murdered. But eventually I got embarrassed because I was an American woman haunting those halls day in and day out. What are the guards and docents thinking about this woman who weeps all the time? I didn't know what so
here she comes again, right?
Exactly. What do we do with her?
Right.
So I thought, okay, I've got to go somewhere else. And I went somewhere that honestly, Matt, apart from the sovereignty of God, I would have never gone. I went to the Modern Art Museum. Wow. And I say it that way because I grew up in a very, very fundamentalist home and church that taught that abstract modern art was godless, was anarchy, was not something that a Christian could have anything to do with.
Right.
And there I sat in a gallery with paintings of nothing but line, color, design, angles, texture, space, crying out to God, what am I doing here? How do I connect to you? Where are you, my God? And I can't explain this. I can only describe what happened. In my heart, I heard God say, Dianne, he used my name. That was so beautiful. Dianne, I am the original abstract artist.
Wow.
Everything you see in creation came from my imagination. Everything you call beautiful began with line, color, design, texture, space. And he said, Dianne, if you trust me, I'll take the broken pieces of your heart and make something beautiful out of it. And I worshiped. I didn't worship the paintings. I worshiped my God.
Yeah.
And in that worship, I knew that God had started my healing. I couldn't explain it, but I knew. And before I left the gallery, I heard the word of the Lord one more time. And that was, Dianne, I have a new calling, a new purpose for you. I want you to find and encourage artists. Well,
Wow.
Matt, I didn't know any artists. I
Yeah.
didn't know why they needed to be encouraged, and I
Right.
didn't know how to do it. So everywhere we went around Europe, every conference we went to,
Mm.
every gathering, I would say, are there any artists here? Well, I didn't know what to do with them when they identified themselves. So I would just say, tell me your story. I
Yeah.
just want to hear what has brought you to this place. And I listened, and over I heard from artists of faith, alienation, loneliness, hurt, rejection, needing support. And where they felt alienated the most was from their church.
That's right. Yeah.
And so ultimately, I'm a researcher. I was working on my doctorate eventually, and ultimately I did my doctoral dissertation on looking at why then the Protestant churches of today's Europe, which would have been actually 2000, but why this was happening. And so my whole research was interviewing pastors, interviewing artists of faith in Germany, Switzerland, and Spain. Started out thinking I'd do all of Europe, and quickly realized I'd never finish the dissertation. So I had to narrow it, and I
Right.
narrowed it to the birthplace of the Reformation and the birthplace of the Counter-Reformation,
Mm.
to compare the two and see. And I committed my life to carrying out this call of God to find and encourage artists. And
I can't believe we've not been friends before this. I mean,
I
I'm just
know
like, I'm
it.
listening to your story. I'm like, oh my gosh, because I guess two things come out to me as you're sharing. I mean, one is that the world is finally waking up to the idea that
Yes,
that art is a means of grace, that it's this intersection point that God uses in our life, not as an end in itself, but as a way for the Lord to speak to and through
right.
us as artists, and to us as artists, and to the world. And the second thing I think that is always so, frustrating and beautiful at the same time, is that God uses our deepest place of woundedness,
Absolutely.
as our place of restorative ministry. And I think for myself, having gone through all the stuff that I went through as a kid, really rough relationship with my dad, sexual abuse by a family member,
Mm,
performance orientation as an artist, living kind of this double life of everything's rosy on one side and feeling very broken on the inside. And at the end of all that, God calling me as a father to artists. And I'm like, are you kidding? Because father is probably the deepest place of wounding that I had
inter-
experienced. And yet it was
that
out of
interesting.
that the Lord, same way, just had me
Yeah,
start sharing your story with other artists that are hurting, and watch what I'm going to do. And
right.
wow, how
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
So now so how did you get to Charlotte then? So you're in Europe, but now you're in Charlotte. So how did that transition happen?
Well, that transition happened in 2000. We started losing our support and financial support, and we did everything we'd ever done to build that support, and finally had to come to the hard decision and understanding that God was using that means to redirect us, to
Right.
send us back to the US for a new something. We didn't
Hmm.
know what. And so we ended up in Charlotte specifically because our daughter and son-in-law and two grandchildren were here. And that's, a compensating factor for a grandmother is
That's
to
right.
have
And
those
leverage for
grandkids.
them as well. So that's
Exactly.
good.
So we settled here, and I worked as an intercultural trainer up in Rutherford County at the
Oh yeah.
Center for Intercultural Training, because that's really what my background is an intercultural trainer. So I had the privilege in those 5 years of training um, over 500 missionaries to go to the field,
Mm,
and in that, but then Byron Spradlin
right.
had heard about my dissertation, and he contacted me and encouraged me to join Artists in Christian Testimony. as an academic, that's how he saw me.
Right.
As it turns out, I'm more of I've been teased that I manage through mothering. I'm more of a encourager, come alongside
That's
and
right.
care for. So I started with them and have served with them. And then, like I say, my husband's ministry changed. We lost our funding to even, we were spending 6 months a year in Europe, 3 months
Hmm.
in the spring and 3 months in the fall. We lost the financial ability to do that. And so I was saying, open calendar, God, for 6 months a year, I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
Is it possible that you would have me fulfill this call, do something here? And within 2 months, I had met 4 or 5 artists of faith who had the same passion to
Mm.
do something in our city. And Art Charlotte exists to nurture the soul of the city through the arts. And we do so with encouragement of education. We find there's a lot of artists of faith who do not know where their creative gift even originated.
Right.
They don't know their purpose. And then we engage in the city in any way we can through the arts to be light and salt and sweet aroma of Christ. And so I have a great team. We need more people. We don't have any money, but we are in the, trying to encourage artists to be who God called them to be in this city, to present Him in a very natural way of expressing beauty
Yeah.
and expressing a freedom
Yeah.
that we have that others don't know anything about. And so that's what we do.
I love that. I had that written down actually to ask you, nurture the soul of the city. Unpack that a little bit of because that really is so beautiful and yet it's so intimate, so it's not so many times I think when people do things from a ministry perspective, and you've seen this, it's kind of like, okay, we're here, we're going in to,
Yeah.
take over, here's our program, that sort of thing. And nurture the soul of the city sounds like a one by one loving
Mhm.
people embracing their heart. I mean, so I guess talk about that for
Yeah.
those that are wondering, what does that even look like? How do you nurture the
Yeah.
soul of a city?
Well, we all had the people who had come together to be my original core team had all been very influenced by the book Culture Care by
Yeah,
Makoto
Mako Fujimura.
Fujimura.
Yeah.
And Mako influenced us greatly that we have a role to and a privilege of being Christ ambassadors through art in a very natural way in our city. So we were looking at how to express that. And I met with a woman who was the head of a major foundation in the city. I don't know if she has a relationship with Christ or not. I don't even know. But she said to me, she said, you know what Charlotte needs? It's such a great banking business center. But in becoming that, Charlotte lost its soul.
Mm,
And that's where that came from.
wow.
That we're going to attempt to encourage and nurture that innermost being of our city through organizations, through individuals. We do a lot of coming alongside artists and gallery owners, and they're all struggling. They all need someone to listen. They all need hope. And it is a lot one by one, but we also do some things very publicly. Um, Communal murals, working with low-income housing that is being built that is sterile and needs beauty, and so we embrace the occupants to either allow them to have art in their house or to come together and make something beautiful in the lobby of their building, and they take ownership of it,
How
and
wonderful.
it makes it a home. There's just so many ways that, and we encourage every artist that takes part with Art Charlotte to find a way to be used to nurture and care for someone else in our city through their art. We use the Charlotte Rescue Mission has wonderful programs. UMAR with adults who have developmental issues. There's just so many places
Yeah.
that need artists who have compassion, who have care. And so I must say, while I don't call myself an artist, Mako is the one who said, Dianne, you're not an artist, but you are a creative catalyst. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's what the label I'm going under
That's
now.
right. That's right. I love that. I'm just thinking, so I spend most of my life in this podcast and our mentoring program and all that. We really help artists grow spiritually, artistically, and in business. So how do you take what you're wanting to do and really thrive in the marketplace? How to,
Right.
be a profitable business, that sort of thing. But one of the things that I practice this myself and I really teach a lot is that the best way to break the back of the starving artist mentality is radical generosity.
That's great.
That as you will give of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously, that can be a little bit of a tension with artists because this is not only what you do as your give back, but also this is what you do for your living and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I've just found that as you radically are generous with the gifting that God's given you, all of a sudden that's where the life and the fulfillment can come back
Yes.
in a place where many artists can feel dry, making a living from their work, and
So
and vice versa. People that are giving back when they learn how to do things in the marketplace, it gives them back that fire as well. And I just love that's such the heart of what you're doing, teaching people to give of
Mm-hmm.
themselves. It goes, as we give, the Lord's, what does it say in Proverbs? He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. And
Absolutely.
I love that. I love
We
that.
have a lot in common in what our calling and our ministry is working out to be. I think that's exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Talk a little bit about, community with artists, because I know that, so when the Lord called me in 2009, Matt, you're a father to artists, go to the nations, raise up an army of artists.
Mhm.
I just, kind of like you, I just started calling people I knew and to my basement. And then before long, the Lord gave us an art gallery, and we just started
Mm.
kind of gathering people. And, you find out real quickly that as talented as people are, there are a lot of hurting
Mhm.
creatives out there. What do you say to people who may be in that situation of being the one that's hurt or being the one that's carrying that baggage and really
Yeah.
kind of being fearful of creative, not wanting to share those, intimate thoughts and feelings of the things
Mm.
they've gone through, just kind of wanting to keep that facade? How do you invest in community when you've been hurt?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, you have to, what we attempt to do is create a safe place,
Yeah.
a place where what is shared is taken seriously. We listen. It may be one-on-one, but we do have groups of groups of artists that meet. Um, I think learning that God wants to bring beauty out of brokenness,
Yeah.
and that that's what he's promised, that he wants to do that for us. But we have to be willing to trust him with that
Mm,
brokenness,
yeah.
to identify that brokenness. For me, my writing, a lot of my speaking, my book is on forgiveness,
Yeah.
walking and understanding the power and the freedom that forgiveness brings. And while we have group meetings, a lot of my role as director is working then in between those meetings, meeting with those individuals one on one and affirming them. And it's amazing when somebody truly listens to you
Yeah.
and and does not judge your brokenness, but allows you to express it,
Yeah.
and then praying God's blessing and miraculous beauty that he wants to bring. Most of them don't understand that's even possible.
Right.
last year, 2019, Art Charlotte's theme for the entire year was Beauty from Brokenness.
Wow.
And we started with showing, there's been a 16-minute short film about my journey that Mako produced, that talks about that beauty from brokenness. And we started there, and then we ultimately in November had a huge for us, a gathering of people. We had an art show that with that theme. We called forth writers and poets and people who write songs and dramatists all around that theme, and we expressed it that night. And then the art show, the exhibit, has then gone on to go into church art galleries here in town. Right now, it was at New City Church. It's now at Myers Park United Methodist Church. We're trying, with the testimonies that go along with each of those pieces of art, we're trying to say it's okay to admit that you're broken. But you don't have to live from your brokenness anymore.
That's good. Doesn't have to define you, does it?
Doesn't have to define you.
Yeah.
But you can ultimately even use that experience of being broken to be that sweet aroma of Christ in somebody else's life.
Yeah.
Because God never wastes Steve Saint says God never wastes a hurt if you allow him to write it into his story.
Oh, that's good.
And that's what we're trying to help our artists do. And some artists who work with Art Charlotte are anywhere on the journey. Some of them haven't come to actual faith. They're just checking it out.
Yeah.
And others are, but my joy, my delight of my life is to enter and walk alongside someone wherever they are on that journey, just one step closer to the Savior. And having somebody who really accepts you and cares and listens but points you to hope is changing lives. It's what God does.
That's right. That's right. So
it's
good.
Amazing. It's just amazing.
As you're sharing this, I'm reminded when the Lord first called me to raise up an army of artists, I had a vision during that season when I was in prayer one day of the Lord showed me the globe and fire coming up like just patches of fire all over the world. And I said, Lord, what is that? And he said, they're wells of blessing. And he said, they're going to be communities that will come together and care for the hearts of artists, and there'll be safe places, outposts, if you will.
Yes.
And that from that, there's going to be incredible blessing that flows out. And I can't help but just, feel goosebumpy all over. I just feel the Holy Spirit so strong on what you're saying. And I know that there are those that are listening, because there are thousands and thousands of people that listen to this podcast all over the world that are saying, wow, Dianne, I would love to have something like that started in my area. So for somebody that's out there that's in Tasmania or New Zealand or in Asia or somewhere in Europe or South America, how would they even begin to think about and conceptualize doing something like what you guys are doing in Art Charlotte?
Well, first of all, I think you really pray and ask God to give you a community. That doesn't have to be a huge group.
Yeah.
It can be 2 other people who have the same heart and are willing to pray with you about this. Because I think God wants us to exhibit, to demonstrate to the world what it means to be in true community. And then I think, where to start is where you and I started. Start asking questions and just be quiet. Listen.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen. And if this is of the Lord, there is absolutely no question that people will start to gather, because they're seeking that. They feel that alienation. They feel that the church doesn't understand them. I mean, it's getting better, but we still have artists who do not feel validated in their creative gift by their church. And what's happened in Europe is that these groups have grown so I'm not talking big, I'm talking meaningful, deep.
Yeah.
Churches have been started just from artists gathering to be the community of faith.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
we're seeing churches, um, it was amazing to me. When I ended my dissertation, I was discouraged about the church and the role of the arts. I had no idea that God was intending to light a fire, just as you saw
Yeah.
in your vision, a light a fire, that he was going to start using artists around the world
Yeah.
to be his people,
Yeah.
and demonstrate what it means to care for one another and to care for the world,
Yeah.
and to give that generous manner. uh, I think too often we get caught up in what success looks like,
Yeah.
and oftentimes that is numbers, or it's, you're keeping some list of some sort. God's going to work individually in each situation, and I had to redefine what Art Charlotte's success was,
Mm.
instead of how well we're known or how many people attend our
Yeah.
gatherings.
Yeah.
It had to be, God, are we doing what you called us to do?
Yeah.
And our lives being changed,
Yeah.
and our artists being encouraged, and his creativity happening. Because when an artist finds freedom and hope, there's no end to the
Watch
creativity that
out. That's
comes out of them.
right.
So, one by one,
That's
one by
right.
one,
That's right. How
he
beautiful
works with each of us individually.
he does.
He really does.
Well, Dianne, what a pleasure to have you on today. I know it's been
Thank
such an
you.
encouragement to my listeners and all that. I know folks are going to want to connect with you further, get your book. It's called I Choose to Forgive, right?
That's correct.
And connect with you with Art Charlotte. So where's the best place that folks can connect with you for the next step?
Well, Art Charlotte is artcharlotte.org,
Okay.
artscharlotte.org. My ministry mission, my website is called Montage International.
Wonderful.
A montage is a painting that's made up of multiple complete paintings. And when I was establishing who I was with Artists in Christian Testimony, I was this intercultural trainer. I was passionate about the arts. I was speaking and writing on forgiveness. And those all could have been individual, complete ministries. So that's why montageinternational.org. And I would be delighted to connect with any of your listeners, and just see if we can encourage one another
Absolutely.
to let this incredible arts and faith movement just flourish.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, all you guys that are listening over in Charlotte, I know there's a ton of you.
Oh my.
I know. Find Dianne. All right. You can
Yes.
go down to the show notes in the bottom of the podcast here and connect there, and others that are around the world just for inspiration in what she's doing. Please connect with her. So Dianne, thank you so much again for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. It's been great.
Hey, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today on the podcast. Listen, I hope it's been a huge encouragement to you on your journey as an artist. Hey, also, before you leave, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the other episodes of the Thriving Christian Artist podcast. And also, be sure to connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or at my website, which is matttommymentoring.com. Until next time, remember, you were created to thrive. Bye-bye.